Hey, everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. It is Wednesday. Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock. It's about 2:15 here on Wednesday. Again, I say this every day. We're getting closer. So Thursday, we're going to hear from Andrew Berry. He's going to have his pre-draft availability. Then we're kind of into the offseason program. The Browns offseason program actually starts next week, the same week as the draft. And then, of course, we are coming up on the draft about a week away, probably exactly a week away when some of you are listening to this here on Thursday. So some resolution is coming. And so I came up with a few questions to ask you guys regarding the draft. And the first one I had is because obviously how we've talked about this number 2 pick has changed. We've all sort of began to buy into this idea that it's Travis Hunter at 2, not Shedeur Sanders. And it got me thinking about this because we've been through this with the Browns before. Mary Kay, we've talked a lot about what it would mean to miss on a quarterback at 2, that it's a lot easier to deal with that now, that the contract isn't as restrictive. If you miss, you can always correct that error. It does set you back a little, but it's not franchise suicide to miss on a quarterback at number 2. So I've been thinking, what would be worse for the Browns, do you think? How would they come out looking worse if they were to take a quarterback at 2 and miss, or if they were to go the safe route and take Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter or someone else at 2, and then Shedeur Sanders goes someplace else and is really good? What do you think makes them look worse?
Well, it's a great question, Dan. It really is a great question. And my first instinct would be to say that it would be worse for a Patrick Mahomes like situation where the quarterback goes on to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and just nails it. But with the Cleveland Browns track record on quarterbacks lately, I have to wonder if it wouldn't almost be worse for them to take a big swing and a miss again and have this quarterback fail. So it's a very tough question, and it's not an easy one to answer. But in the interest of staying sort of true to myself on this topic, I am going to say that it would be worse. I don't know if it would look worse, but it would be worse to pass on this quarterback and have him go somewhere else and be very nicely successful. And I guess we should define success here, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So I would say defining success in my mind would be for the quarterback to get to his second contract and along the way to take the team to multiple playoffs and maybe win some playoff games. I don't think it has to be going all the way to the Super Bowl or anything like that. That's a bar probably a little too high. But I think a successful quarterback for the Cleveland Browns at number 2 overall would be one who would take them to multiple playoffs. They would win multiple playoff games, and that he would get to his second contract. So I do think that it would be worse if the Cleveland Browns watched a quarterback get away and go somewhere and be nicely successful.
Yeah, and I think both would be bad. I mean, if the Browns drafted a quarterback who ended up, not being good, who went on the jersey and just never became that guy, and Travis Hunter is, lighting it up on both sides of the ball, Abdul Carter's getting 14 sacks a year, whatever it is, obviously they would look bad in that sense. But maybe it's just because we've lived it at times where the Browns have passed on a quarterback or they've taken a wrong quarterback. I think it would be really tough for this team sitting here at number 2 overall to have a quarterback basically right there to take. And then let's say Shedeur Sanders becomes, again, maybe not Mahomes, maybe not Josh Allen, but becomes, let's just say, a top 10 quarterback, like a good quarterback who wins football games. And like you said, Mary Kay, gets to the playoffs every year and runs an offense and is exactly what you want at the position, even if he's not like an elite, maybe in that elite group. And for as great as maybe another player you might take would be, you'd still be sitting here saying, okay, but you passed on a quarterback again. I guess that's what makes this so hard, Ashley. Like because there isn't a sure thing at quarterback, this is the decision the Browns have to make, and then they have to live with the fallout if they make the wrong one.
Yeah, I think my answer has to stay the same as well, because I think like last week when we did the whole Lewis Riddick reaction podcast, I flat out said the same thing. Like I said, if you don't take him, you better hope he doesn't go to New York and immediately turn them into like a playoff team, which let's look at the Giants right now and say hypothetically the Browns take Travis Hunter and the Giants take Shador. You're pairing Shador with Brian Dable, who we know how obviously integral he was to Josh Allen and helping him find his way in the NFL. And you're giving him a very, very, very good young receiver in Malik Neighbors. Like, I look at that Giants team and say, you had Shador. What if they win 9 games? What if they are in playoff contention immediately? And what if the Browns take Travis Hunter and they win 5 or 6 games because for whatever reason the quarterback problem is not solved? Like, let's say they take somebody a little later, one of those second tier guys, and you start with Joe Flacco, but Joe Flacco's unable to recreate the Flacco magic exactly how it was 2 years ago in 2023. Like, I don't think that's out of the question. And I think if you're a fan, that would be most frustrating to see them pass on that person, still get a good player, but a good player who is not able to immediately change the fortune of your team just because of the position he plays. I know this team, this roster has holes, other holes besides quarterback it needs to fill. But if you aren't taking a big swing there to fill it immediately and that person goes on and has fairly immediate success somewhere else, I do think that to me is the worst look.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to the owners' meetings. I mean, we keep referencing that, Mary Kay, with what Jimmy and Dee told you guys when you were down there, and how they talked about this idea of, maybe they're okay with waiting until next year for a quarterback, depending on how this class shakes out, and sort of pumping the brakes on expectations for this football team this year, because maybe there is a little bit of a, if they're not going to solve quarterback, then I mean, there's a chance that this quarterback room might it might look pretty ugly by mid October or November. So I do feel like there's Andrew. It's a little trickier for Andrew to say something like that. Kevin really can't say anything like that because Kevin's got to coach these guys all the time, and he's got to have these guys believing that they're going to shock the world and win 12 games. So it's a little trickier for those guys, but it has still stuck with me that I thought the Haslams really did pump the brakes on expectations, which, if that's kind of what you're doing and if that's kind of how you're looking at this year, it makes it a little easier and a little more palatable, even if Shador does go on to be successful, to kind of look at this year and say we just needed to fix the rest of the roster before we dropped a quarterback in there.
Well, I think the thing that makes this tough is the fact that it's just not a good quarterback year. It's just really not. After Cam Ward, there really are a bunch of question marks about who is going to be successful and when. And for most of the draft, it seemed like it was two and then the rest, meaning Ward and Shador Sanders and then the rest. And somehow, some way, it seems like Shador has joined the other group and that it's Ward and the rest at this point. Unless, of course, the Giants surprise us and go ahead and take him at number 3. I still don't think the Browns at this point are going to take him at number 2. I can't say that for sure, but that's the way that it seems like it's going at this point. But yeah, Jimmy did pump the brakes, and I think we have to take him at face value on that. I think he was trying to say, this might not be our year, and let's just see what happens. So I do think that everyone gets a little bit of a pass this year while they sort out and figure out their quarterback situation. And in a perfect world, once again, I think that they are still hoping to catch that lightning in a bottle and hoping that Kenny Pickett not only turns into someone who can start for them this year, but perhaps someone who can be a multiple year starter for them. So we'll have to see how it all goes. Or maybe they have a little trick up their sleeve that we do not know about. Maybe they have something that they feel good about on draft weekend, and they'll surprise us all.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe they love one of these other guys. I think again, the farther you go back, the more risk it is, and you start talking about guys who are intriguing, right? Like a Tyler Shook, who has his profile has just risen and risen throughout this, but also you're talking about a guy who was Justin Herbert's teammate in college and is going to be 26 years old. And you don't know if he's even going to be ready week one to be a starter in the NFL. So there's risk there. Jackson Dart is intriguing, but he's 21 and is coming out of that funky Lane Kiffin offense. Jalen Milroe is intriguing for all the reasons we talked about. I mean, earlier this week, Mary Kay, even I said, if I'm just taking a chance on one of these second tier guys, I take a chance on Milroe. But kind of what we thought would happen with Milroe has happened. The farther we've gotten away from football, the more his profile has risen. So there's a lot of risk in these second tier guys. So I guess, Ashley, even if they're looking at one of those guys, just as much as we can poke holes in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, we can obviously poke holes in those guys too.
Dan, I feel like you get a mini victory lap at some point
I
over
do?
the Jalen Milroe. Yeah, because you in like January, I think, said that when Jalen Milroe gets further away from playing football and he tests really well, his stock is going to rise. I remember you talking about this. I feel like that is worth a minor mini victory lap potentially.
But I'm kind of anti-victory lap, except for when I tried to take a small one over that 49ers game a few years ago, and you guys put me in my place. You guys rightly put me in my place.
You know what? I'm lifting your ban on victory laps for this one little thing.
If I were like in charge of sports, though, my rule would be if you're going to take victory laps, you also have to go out and point out all the times you were wrong. And we would be on this podcast for about 4 hours today if I had to sit here and point out all the times I've been wrong.
Forever. Okay, good point. But the other point I want to make with all of this, and we talk about, is it Cam Ward and everybody else? And just to go back to the initial question of what's worse for them, when I say, I think it's worse if they don't take Shedeur and they miss, I don't think you can just take a swing on a quarterback and a guy you genuinely don't believe in. If they are sitting there and saying, we do not think Shedeur is the guy for whatever reasons they have, then don't force it just because you need a quarterback. We obviously all agree on that. Where I think it looks bad, though, is if you are wrong, and that points to some other issues in terms of your evaluation and how you went about this process. So that's why, I guess, just to kind of clarify why I think it's worse, I don't think you should force the pick if you genuinely don't think it's him. But you better be right at this point, right? And I mean, I agree. We can sit here and poke holes in all these guys. And to Mary Kay's point, it's not last year. It's not last year. And no matter how much I think the Browns and other people have tried to talk up this QB class throughout this process, we were talking about this back in February. It's in their best interest to talk up these quarterbacks. At the end of the day, when you have the number 2 pick, it's in your best interest to create that intrigue, to possibly get somebody to bite, give you something for that pick. We know that. And I just think truly, maybe it is Cam Ward and everybody else. And I think there's reasons Cam Ward could be successful and could be more like Jaden Daniels than not. Everybody else, I think there's legit questions to their game. So if the Browns don't feel comfortable, and if ownership has essentially said, look, we don't have to figure this out immediately, then, as Mary Kay said, you get kind of a free pass. And I think it makes it easier to punt the football down the road a little bit longer, so to speak.
Yeah, and to that bigger picture that Ashley mentioned, Mary Kay, obviously we've talked about this in the past. This is a little more controversial just because of the way his career has played out, but we were all there in 2016 when they decided to pass on Carson Wentz at number 2 and came out the Paul DePodesta, and he had some stuff that came out and said they didn't even think he'd be a top 20 quarterback. He gets off to a pretty good start in his career. It goes off the rails later, but that obviously brought some heat. But then really 2017 is kind of the year you look at, and they either, I mean, you've mentioned it, all the discord, the internal discord, nobody was on the same page. So because of that, they either just completely whiffed on that evaluation of Mahomes or whiffed on kind of how they could figure out a way to get Mahomes and who might jump whom to try and get him. And then they whiffed on the evaluation of Deshaun Watson too, because we're not talking about what Deshaun Watson has become. We're talking about what he was when he was sitting there at number 12 to just pick. And they didn't do it. They traded out of that pick. And he went on to, he was excellent as a rookie before he got hurt. And then he made Pro Bowls. And of course, his career went off the rails too. But the Deshaun they passed on was not the Deshaun we talk about today. So to a bigger point, like if they're just sitting here saying, hey, we just don't think Shador's that guy, that's fine. But if they're wrong, that does kind of reignite this discussion of, okay, but then do they know exactly what they're looking for at that position?
You're so right about that. And of course, I was very, very heavily involved in those drafts that you're talking about. And I don't think that they would have taken Patrick Mahomes had he been there for him at number 12. I don't think that was the plan, because if at that point they saw in him what he was, they would have jumped up and grabbed him somewhere before 12, knowing that someone else was probably going to do it. By then, you should have plenty of intel on what other teams are up to and what they're doing. And if you thought there was some chance you could get your hands on him at number 10 that year, where the Chiefs got him, or a little bit even ahead of that, then you would have done it. All you had to do was come up from number 12. That's all you had to do. Or all you had to do was stay there at number 12 and take Deshaun Watson. So they misevaluated those two quarterbacks, their favorite quarterback that year. And again, Sashi Brown was in charge of this draft. Their favorite quarterback that year was Mitch Trubisky. And had he been there at number 12, then I think they would have taken him. So it's a hard gig. It really is, because again, we've talked about this so many times before. When you look at some of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now, some of the most successful quarterbacks in the NFL right now, you're talking about Patrick Mahomes, who nobody knew what to make of him. Nobody knew what to make of Lamar Jackson, and he tumbled to number 32 in the first round of the 2018 draft. Nobody quite knew what to do about Josh Allen, and he fell to number 7 that year when he should have been number 1 overall. Brock Purdy, who would have ever thought that right now Brock Purdy is getting ready to make a boatload of money. So it's really hard to get it right. And then once you do get it right, or once you do draft a quarterback, then so much has to do with what you do with him once he gets into your building. And that is very, very key. So I still think that, and we've talked about this in recent days, there's a decent chance that somebody could get their hands on a Jalen Milroe and take those very tantalizing traits and figure out what the heck to do with him. In the early going, you run him a lot. He's a phenomenal runner, 4.37 in the 40. That's a weapon. I don't care what anybody says. That's a weapon right there. And then you see what you can do with the passing game. You develop the passing game and see where it can take you. And if it doesn't really take you anywhere, then maybe you find something else that you can do with him. So that's one that, I'm still very intrigued by, but it's really, really hard to figure it out and to get it right. And I think that's why I would err on the side of taking a few swings, taking a few cracks at it, and see what you can't come up with. I would much rather, I've said this so many times this offseason, I would much rather take a chance and take a big swing and miss than not take a swing.
Yeah, and again, just being there at number 2, it's right there for you. And yeah, you do wish that maybe it was last year, or maybe it's next year. But we've talked about this too. We don't know what next year's class is exactly going to look like. I have the list of quarterbacks up here, and there are definitely guys that I've watched and I'm intrigued by, but you just don't know where you're going to fall in the draft. You don't know who's going to be in front of you, who might need a quarterback. You don't know who might come out or who might not come out. Like, I mean, just one example is Carson Beck went into this year as, in a lot of people's eyes, maybe a potential top pick. And then he ended up transferring, and now he's with Miami. And he didn't even come out this year. And his profile fell as the season went along. A guy like a Drew Aller, or I know a lot of people like Garrett Nussmeier. There are some guys that are that might definitely make next year's class really awesome, but we just don't know. There's just too many unknowns right now in the landscape of college football and with how this season goes. And again, you win 2 stupid games next year that maybe you shouldn't win, and that takes you from, I don't know, the 3rd or 4th pick to the 8th pick, right? And that completely changes what you're capable of doing. So I don't know. It's tough. And I understand it, Ashley, to your point. I understand if they're looking at this and saying he's just not it. Like, we're watching Shador or whomever else, and he's just not it. And we're better off taking a chance on a guy like Jalen Milroe, who can be a weapon for us this year, whether he's our starter or not. And we can figure out how to make that quarterback run game be one of our most dangerous weapons, and then let him develop into something more beyond that. Again, I'll say, I mean, if you're taking a risk on one of these second tier guys, it might as well be a guy with that 4.37 speed who, like you said, Mary Kay, can cause a whole bunch of problems for a defense just by his ability to run the football. But that's just the situation the Browns are in right now, Ashley.
Well, and here's the other thing I keep thinking about. And I think this perspective comes from really only covering this team when they have second round picks and later throughout my tenure, and seeing and hearing everything Andrew Berry does and says about the draft process. And I don't know if we'll get him going on this in the same way we have in years past this year. I definitely don't think it would be until after the draft, but he's always just so big on taking players where they are valued. So part of me wonders too, how much is that going to play a factor into this? If they look at Shedeur Sanders and they're like, okay, like, we could in theory work with this, but we just don't see the value in taking him number 2 overall. Whereas Travis Hunter, we see as the top prospect in this draft, and suddenly he's fallen to us at number 2. I'm very curious about that aspect of it, because we've just heard it from them year after year, time and time again. Going back, my first encounter really with this was in 2022 when they still had a second round pick and they traded down because they didn't like the value they were seeing there, right? So I don't know. And Mary Kay, I know you've written about this and I agree with it. I think quarterback is just different. Like, I think that's almost like faulty logic to me. Now, maybe who am I to say that, right? I'm just a reporter who covers the team. But I do think like the positional value of it, you can't view it in that same way. And I wonder, given everything else we've talked about, given you have the excuse it's a weaker class, you kind of have the thumbs up from ownership to, hey, we don't have to problem solve this all the way through this year. I keep coming back to thinking about how they view where these guys are valued and where they are falling. And they would rather get somebody, I think, in most instances, for a better value. Even if it's not a quarterback, even if it's not like the number one thing they need, if they don't value him as a top 2 talent, like, I think there's a real possibility that, hey, they're not going to use the number 2 pick on a Shedeur Sanders or another quarterback they like.
Okay, one more draft question here, and we'll get away from quarterback talk here for a little bit. So let's just assume that Travis Hunter is the pick at number 2. So wide receiver, cornerback, Travis Hunter, and let's, we've talked a lot about quarterback, so let's take that out of the mix for this question. What position on day 2 do you most want to see the Browns fix if they take Travis Hunter at number 2 overall, and we're taking quarterback out of it? So we're sitting there Friday night, Mary Kay, and they haven't fixed this position. what are you saying? Man, I can't believe they didn't do that. They absolutely needed to fix that. So what position do you think is the most important to address on day 2?
Well, I don't know why we have to take quarterback out of that here.
Well, I'm just saying that because I think that's almost like an assumption, right? If they aren't taking a quarterback, I don't know. Maybe that's too easy, but we can say that if we want.
All right. Well, that is what I would do.
Okay.
At number 33, or I would even trade back up into the first round and try to get the best quarterback left after Shedeur Sanders that they like out of this group with that next pick, because I do think that they have to address it. And I think you should try to address it as high as you possibly can, but we can take it out of the mix. And if we are taking it out of the mix, then I think at that point, I probably would be going edge rusher there, because I think it's such a premium position. It's deep. And I think there are enough good ones that you probably could get one somewhere around there or trade back up and get one there, as long as, like I said, as long as we're taking quarterback out of the mix, because that is the number one thing that I would do there.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm at too. Obviously, yeah, quarterback. You're not taking a quarterback in the first round. You've got to take one somewhere in this draft. So for you, it would be you have to take one day two. You're not taking one of these fourth, fifth, sixth round guys. You're not taking Curtis Rourke. Well, maybe you are. You're taking both.
I would take both. I would take one as high as I can get them, and then I would take the next best one that you like as high as you can get that one. But I also think that they should end up with, if they can, a really good running back, a good receiver, tight end, edge rusher.
So I keep coming back to edge rusher at 33, Ashley, and it's tricky because you know, you're going to need a tight end. You're going to need a running back. You did take Travis Hunter, so at least you've got that at receiver. But I keep coming back to edge rush because when I look at this roster and I think about what we might be saying in October or November, there's one of two ways it could go. We could sit here and be saying, man, they nailed it on Isaiah McGuire. He really built off that end of last season. Alex Wright was really good this year, and they should give him a new contract. Or we could be saying they really don't have a second edge rusher right now, and they really still need one, and that's going to be a priority in next year's free agency in the draft. So I think adding to that stable of edge rushers and maybe just adding a more sure thing, even though none of these draft guys are sure things necessarily, but adding just whoever it is. I know there's probably going to be a run on edge rushers in that first round, but I think there's going to be somebody sitting there at 33 that's going to be able to help this team.
I mean, every time I've played around with these mock draft simulators, there is always somebody classified as top 32 talent in terms of the edge rusher category that's left. It's usually been Scarton out of Texas A&M. Now, I don't know if he's going to be available there truly at 33, but to your point, I think somebody is going to fall there. I would even open it up and say not just edge rusher, but if they get a good pass rushing D tackle, I think that's good too. I would just say somewhere on the D line you have to add. That's when I've liked my mocks the best. The caveat to that is that's been when I've taken a quarterback in the first round. So I do think, like, if you're not taking a quarterback at 33, it better be because you traded back up into the first round to get somebody. Otherwise, quarterback at that point, get the best guy you can. And then to Mary Kay's point, maybe take somebody else on day 3 too.
So, okay, what about this then? Would you prioritize tight end or running back on day 2? What do you think? And certainly they could get both. Ashley, you would go tight end?
I would go tight end because I really think maybe it's because I'm just obsessed with Elijah Arroyo at this point from Miami. I really think he's going to be available. I think he's really good. I've seen Mason Taylor available, and Dan, I know you took him fairly late in your mock.
He's my favorite day right? 2. I like Arroyo. I like Fannin, but
I think Mason Taylor somebody might bite on earlier, just given the NFL pedigree there, obviously. But I think running backs, you can always find decent help on day 3. Like maybe, and I think like Travion Henderson, who I had them taking in earlier mock drafts, I think his stock is rising too high. I think they're going to be out of the mix for those Ohio State guys. So I would prioritize tight end just because I think the value is going to be there for running backs on day 3 in a way that they can utilize it.
But the counterpoint to that, Mary Kay, would be like we've seen what this run game can look like when you have a really high-level running back. And Andrew, a couple years ago, did say that he thinks like scheme and your line is more indicative of having a good run game. But when you put a player like Nick Chubb behind it, it just supercharges that run game. So that would be the argument for saying, like, yeah, you've got to have some more tight ends, especially if you're going back to this to what this offense used to look like. But it wouldn't hurt to have a really good running back if there's guys sitting there at 33 that maybe should have gone in the first round and didn't. That there's some value in that.
You could certainly make a case, and all you have to do is look to last season to see the impact that some running backs made on their football teams, including Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. So a case can definitely be made. The way that I would look at it is if you have a running back that you have ranked significantly higher than the tight end, which is more of a premium position, I would say, at this point. Then I think you can pull the trigger on the running back, especially if the running back can help you immensely in the passing game. So if you find a running back that is going to be a weapon for you and help you score touchdowns, score that football, then I think you can make a strong case to take that position ahead of the more premium tight end position. But if one of the best tight ends is there, then I think you can still get a really good running back a little bit later because it is a deep class and they come in all shapes and sizes and varieties, and there are a lot of them. So I do think that you can probably hold out a little bit. Also, you have you've got 4 6th-round picks. So you can always trade back up a little bit. You can use some of that as currency to try to get back into a little bit of an earlier round and move up and get a running back that you like a little sooner than maybe you would have. They don't have a 5th-round pick. That's where they got Jerome Ford. So I think if you don't want to go too far back to try to get one. So if anything, if you don't get one earlier, then I think you would want to try to get back into the 5th round and get one there. But I think this is a year where it's going to be really tempting to take an excellent running back higher than you normally would. There are some really, really good ones. And once again, I think the ones that can do multiple things for you, block, catch, run, maybe play some special teams, I think a guy like that could be very valuable.
Yeah, I sent that out to our texters today that I think that they're probably going to get back. Somehow they're going to get like late into the 4th round or 5th round, especially if they don't take a back on Friday night. That seems like maybe kind of the sweet spot where some of these day 3 guys might start coming off the board. So that'll be interesting. I don't know if Andrew can go that long without making picks. What is this, like 104 to 179? We would appreciate it, but I don't think Andrew can go that long without making picks on that Saturday.
And we do not need 4 picks.
Oh my God.
In the 6th round from a journalistic standpoint. We do not need that because the minute you take one, you're already onto the next one, and you've really just looked up the 40 time of the first one. So,
and you're on the conference call with the guy they took 2 picks ago by the time they're on the 3rd one, and so on and so on and so on.
Yes. Yeah, those day 3 picks go fast. Hopefully Andrew will just swap those things out, keep pushing them down the road. Do what you do with the salary cap money. Just push those 6ths down the road. We don't need them. Yeah, it's too many. It's too much. And they have that is it 255 or 253 or something? Like one of the very last picks in the draft. I don't like any of it.
I think it's 5-5. Yeah.
Yeah, no good. That's really what we need. That would be a win draft weekend. Dump some of those 6ths. Get rid of that 7th. Just get to undrafted free agency and let us move on. Okay, that'll do it for this edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Find us on Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk, and on Twitter, Orange Brown Talk. Our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. And of course, you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to your pods. If you didn't listen to yesterday's pod, because I know Spotify was down for a little bit this morning, everything seems to be up and running again. So go back and give that a listen to. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.